All right, so let's get into it. We're going to go ahead and start with a butterfly. Let me go ahead and mute something. I'll be right back. Okay, so let's start with a butterfly pose. Feet together, and you have two choices. Feet out is going to affect your back more, and then feet in is going to affect your groin, adductors. Feet in, knees down, and you could keep your spine straight if you wanted here. If you're doing this and you want to round your back, you want to let your back round. And feel free to use support as always. Forearms, knees sitting up on a block under your forehead, or laying your torso on a bolster. All of those are things that you can try. All right? We'll be here for the full 5 minutes today. Okay, so we're going to come up out of that gradually and we'll transition to our next pose. Again, as usual, we'll do 2 poses and then we will rebound. We'll take a little break. There's no hard and fast rule with that, at least as I learned from my teacher, Paul Grilly. Rebound, you can do one after every pose. You could do that. You could do it just once at the end of class. There's no hard and fast rule about that, but it is a good idea to do it on a regular basis. Okay, so this is a dragonfly. Pretty much our legs are as straight and as wide as they'll go. However, you want your pelvis tilted forward, so you can actually reach back and feel, is the pelvis pointing forward, or do you have a big round curl like this? So some people end up like this, where their pelvis is facing backward, but their head is facing forward. So it's like a C shape. We don't want that. We do want it rounded, but it's like a dome. It's not a C, right? Where the bottom is pointing back and the top is pointing forward. So that's happening. You bend your knees until you get rid of that. For some people, that might be a lot. So all that means is you have a lot of muscle tension, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You just bend your knees, come forward. You're still going to feel the stretch. And in fact, I'll just mention it today. For whatever reason, I don't always mention this, but you could just repeat this. Okay, so if that's you're having a really hard time with this, then you can just repeat, because the knees are already bent in butterfly, but you can also do one of these. Okay, this is just a modified dragonfly. You can put 2 blocks under the knees there like that. So again, I don't mention that in every class, but I thought for whatever reason it came up today, so I thought I would just mention it. I doubt any of you need that variation. Another common question that comes up here is, are my feet supposed to flex or point? Which direction do I point them in? And again, this is very much an individual thing based on your anatomy, what you're experiencing, what you're feeling. So you can flex them, you can point them, but because anatomically there's so much variation in the human form, to say that there's one right way is a mistake. And this is a mistake that many yoga teachers make and have made. Even really well-known, famous yoga teachers make this mistake. So the mistake is they'll sit on their mat and they'll flex their feet and they'll point them in a certain direction. They'll be like, ooh, that feels really good. And then they assume, because that feels good for them, it's going to feel good for everyone else. And it's a huge problem, honestly. It's a huge problem. So generally, unless people get the right education, yoga teachers get the right education, they don't understand that. They don't see through that. Their assumption is that what works for me should work for you. And if it doesn't, you're doing something wrong. So this, again, is a very common mistake that teachers make. No, you should feel this. You don't? Okay, you must be doing something wrong. Let's figure out what you're doing wrong, because this is the result we want. They just don't appreciate or understand how different our bodies can be. Yes, we're all human beings, but there's some very important differences in our shapes, our genetics, our diet, our activities, all of these types of things. So please keep that in mind. I do recommend experimenting. So, try some different things. And the measures are always the same. It's the same 3 things that we measure everything against in our classes, in our postures. The first is safety, always first. If I flex my feet like that and I feel some kind of shooting pain, might not be safe. Might not be safe. Okay? So I don't do it because I'm questioning whether it's safe or not. Now, I'm not going to say that you're always certain when something is safe. I think a lot of times we're not. So there can be a gray area there. That is just part of life, I think. I don't know an area of human endeavor where there's 100% clarity all the time, maybe mathematics. But we don't see that. Mathematics is up here. It's not really like in the world in a sense, you know. There are no like straight lines or perfect circles or perfect geometrical shapes. These are concepts more than anything. And in reality, in physical reality, we don't see things like that. So generally speaking, we have to just acknowledge the kind of imperfection of reality. So safety, not always 100%, but to the best of our ability. Then do I feel the stretch? Today it's here and back here. So it doesn't have to be super intense, doesn't have to be 100%, but you do need to feel it. And then the final thing you decide is like, well, is this comfortable? So if I flex my feet like this, I do feel a deeper stretch, and it's safe and it's pleasant to a degree, but here's the other part of it. This is tiring. This is tiring to do this with my feet. I can do it. I have the strength, but it's not very comfortable, okay? And so if I do this, I relax my feet, I still feel the stretch. It's a little less, and it's enough. So again, the comfort is a factor, because if I'm too uncomfortable, then I might elect not to do this posture, or I might come out of it, or I might not even practice if there's too many uncomfortable things, in too many uncomfortable postures in the practice. Okay, so again, those are the three things always. Should I flex my feet or not? Is it safe? Does it help or hinder the stretch? And then finally, is it making me so uncomfortable that I'm gonna have to come out of the pose? Or does it make me more comfortable, right? What if pointing my feet, oh, that feels better? Well, then you might do it. But remember, it's in that order: safety first, then the stretch, and then comfort. Because sometimes we just have to deal with discomfort. It's just unavoidable. So that's why it's last. It's like a distant third. There'll be certain poses, no matter what we do, we're uncomfortable. We just deal with it as best as we can. All right, let's unwind from that one, and we'll take a short break on our back and just rest for a moment. So again, I've been reporting lately kind of on my condition because I think it can be educational. I talk a lot about healing and how that works and things like that. So I'll talk you through my process. So you know, I had a back, either a new injury or it could be aggravating an old injury. It's very hard to tell. But I definitely have been feeling back pain. And it's kind of been coming and going. It's been interesting. Very often in the past, you know, I might have back pain and then it is just sort of gradually going away. But this one, it seems to be doing certain things that are aggravating it, you know, kind of get worse. And then I'm doing certain things to try and heal it and get the inflammation down, and it gets better. So it's kind of been coming and going. And what that may mean is I'm still in the acute phase of the injury. So when you're in the acute phase, usually the best thing is rest. Now, I've mentioned before, being a yoga teacher is different than doing yoga. So being a yoga teacher has certain occupational hazards. And so I have to do kind of the hardest part of the class without warming up a lot of times. And that's just hard on your body. So it could be that what I'm doing is when I go to work and I demo the postures, I'm actually aggravating that injury. And it could be that what I need is maybe like a week of just rest where I'm not doing any of that. That can be difficult for me given my job, because if I don't go to work, I just don't get paid. I don't have any sick days or anything like that. The money just stops. So it's hard for me to do that. All right, let's bring our legs in. We'll give them a little squeeze and shake it out. So again, I want you to keep that in mind, because a a lot of the things I say are do what I say, not what I do. So most of you, I don't think any of you teach yoga, so you don't have to worry about that occupational hazard. But I like to mention that because you might be thinking, well, if Doug knows so much, then why is he in pain? Why is he having problems in the first place? And again, it's because teaching yoga has occupational hazards. It's not the same thing as doing yoga, okay? So doing yoga, I think, is very good for you. Teaching yoga can actually create problems of its own. Hopefully, I know enough to mitigate that and manage that. We'll see. Okay, let's move our hips over to the right side of the mat. We're going to do a banana pose. So left leg to the left. Then we cross the right ankle over. And then reaching up, grab the right wrist, and we just sort of scoot ourselves over. And we want to feel that stretch right in here, okay? All right. So again, we go through that checklist, decisions here, how far do you go? That's pretty much the main one. How aggressive are you in creating that C shape? So again, does it feel safe? Do I feel the stretch in my right waist and ribs? And then am I comfortable enough to hold this position for the 5 minutes? And all your decisions about how to position your legs, how to position your arms, are just based on that. So I know some students that for whatever reason, just reversing the ankles like that feels better for them. I had a student, she had a birth defect, so her tailbone was deformed at birth. And you would never know, you can't tell by looking at her. She can do all the things, but there are just certain positions for her body where she feels like this shooting pain where it's like her tailbone is pinching her body. And so for her, for whatever reason, who knows why, she found in this posture, just doing this, got rid of it. Just reversing the cross of her legs. And again, this is where I learned from my yin teacher, Paul Grilly, the body is so incredibly complex. Anybody who says that they can explain everything about your body and everything you're feeling, and they're living a hallucination. It doesn't matter if you're a surgeon or a doctor or a physical therapist or a yoga teacher, whatever. Nobody knows everything about the body. So some of you know my ex-girlfriend. She was a surgeon, and she said there were certain things about anatomy that I knew better than she knew, and this is a surgeon. So most people that know about anatomy, they know a very specific range of things because no one knows everything. It's just not possible to hold that much information in your head. That's how complex we are. Add to that, everybody's different. So while most people might have their kidneys in this position in their body, some people might have their kidneys in a relatively significantly different place. Same with the nerves. Some people have more nerves, other people don't. The psoas major and minor, right? Well, some people don't have a psoas minor, they just have the major. And then some people have two muscles there. Okay, so these are things that, again, sometimes yoga teachers don't know. And they don't appreciate that. And so, again, they will teach as though everyone should feel the same thing, everyone should experience the same thing. And it's not, they're not evil, they're not bad. Again, it's just usually a lack of education. They just haven't been exposed to these concepts. And I'll also say it can be scary. A lot of people have difficulty with issues around control. And I'll say that as a yoga teacher, if you have somebody come to you and say, hey, yeah, I got injured in your class, that really doesn't feel good. And you really would love to have something in your tool belt that guaranteed that you never have to experience that. And unfortunately, the reality is there's nothing to guarantee that. Nothing. That's reality. But I think a lot of teachers, just because of the fear and again, I don't want that to happen, they will convince themselves that certain things are true so that they can believe that, well, no, I couldn't have injured you because I taught you exactly what I do and I've never been injured. So that's just not possible. And unfortunately, that's not recognizing reality. Doctors with all of their training, why do they have so much insurance? Because things happen, right? Mistakes are made. Or even if they do everything perfectly, still people can get hurt and injured. Even when a doctor does everything she's supposed to do, follows protocol, does everything right, things can still go sideways or south. It's just reality. Okay, let's switch sides. So this is banana pose, side 2. And we're feeling a stretch here. So there was a film back in the 90s, and it was about global warming. It's called An Inconvenient Truth. And no matter what your feelings are about global warming or Al Gore or any of those things, I love the name of that film because it really says something, an inconvenient truth, right? So again, I'm not talking about whether or not global warming is whatever. I'm not interested in debating that or talking about that. This isn't a platform, for me to talk about, my views about politics or global warming or whatever. That's not interesting to me. But I love that title because that's how a lot of things are in yoga to me. Yoga ultimately to me, and I know my view is different. So if you go to a yoga studio, you talk to a yoga teacher, she very well may just see herself basically as a group fitness instructor. And that's fine. That we need group fitness instructors, trust me. So that is one function a yoga teacher can serve, and it's a great needed function. No harm in that. But for me, my teachers, what they taught me is yoga is much more than group fitness. And so what is yoga really? As my teachers teach it, it really is pointing to truth or reality. It's really about kind of getting in tune with reality, and whether that's the reality of our body and healing and health, or just the reality of the nature of things, the reality of human nature, the reality of the natural universe, just all of it. And so, in a sense, it's interesting because if you look at the beings on this planet, so let's just call them beings, right? We have human beings, of course, but there's a lot of other beings, right? There are dolphins, there are rhinoceroses, squirrels, cheetahs, owls, hawks, fish, turtles, frogs, bears, plants, trees, flowers, right? Lots of living beings on this planet. So it's really only human beings that seem to suffer and have problems, right? Confusion. We fight one another and create wars and just kill millions of our own. And, you might see two wolves fight in the wild or something, that if you have two packs of wolves or something and they come into contact with one another, or if two bears meet in the woods or something, they might fight a little bit, a little skirmish, but they're just usually trying to establish, territory and things like that. And then once that's done, it's done. They don't carry that around with them. They don't have, they hold a grudge years later. They're not traumatized by the event. But we humans are so different, and we tend to have all this mental and emotional baggage and garbage that we carry around with us. And one of the things that happens with us human beings is we stop living in tune with reality. And we create a reality in our head, and it depends somewhat on the reality we create. But evolutionary biologists are theorizing that our brains they default to seeing things in a negative light. That it was just a survival mechanism, that our brains tend to see what's wrong. They tend to see less of what's right, because what's right you don't need to worry about, right? What's right is just running, so let's ignore that. What's wrong? Now, that might be a good survival mechanism, but it may not actually lead to happiness. So again, if you look out your window at the squirrels running around, they might run around and dodge things and run across the street. But if you catch them at the right moment, you can see them just sitting perfectly still, quiet, relaxed. And I suspect they spend actually a lot of their day like that, in essentially meditation, just the natural meditation, peaceful, still, relaxed, not doing anything. And I think a lot of times we don't notice them when they're doing that. But if you have animals at home, you'll probably notice that they spend a lot of the day like that, just laying there, peaceful. Maybe they're in the sun, quiet. Then they might get up and do something for a little while, but then they'll go back down and just be quiet and still for a long time. We humans don't ever do that, do we? All right, let's unwind. If we do, we call it something special, like meditation. Oh, so definitely feeling my back here on that side for whatever reason. So again, it may even be the case that I shouldn't be doing this class today. It's possible. On Monday, I did the class with you guys, and I felt good on Monday. So I woke up, I was like, okay, I think I'm healing. And then Tuesday, it felt worse again. So this is where I'm talking about acute phase. So, it's a little trial and error on my part. I don't think I'll create any permanent damage if I'm mistaken. It just means I'll prolong my recovery, my acute phase. I may be aggravating the injury when really all I need to be doing is getting the inflammation down. So again, very important with healing. Acute phase, rest, get inflammation down. And then chronic phase, now you actually have to start doing things that are painful or difficult. So it's hard for me to say. It, again, will depend on what the outcome of this class is. So tomorrow or later today, how do I feel? Tomorrow, how do I feel? If I feel better, then I will probably continue doing these things, trying to stimulate the healing. If I feel worse, then I may actually skip the class on Monday, because it may not be a good idea for me to do that. Okay, let's bring our legs in. So again, I'm just sharing all this with you. I hope that, if not today, maybe one day when you have an injury, you can remember these things and they will actually help you, be informative for you, because these are things that they weren't necessarily easy to learn. I learned them over a long period of time studying yoga and other healing modalities and things like that. I do want to remind you all, I'm not a doctor, so this is not medical advice. So if you should probably go talk to your doctor and see what she has to say. Okay, let's go ahead and come on up. We'll hinge up. Even that, I can feel somewhat sensitive in my back doing that. We'll come into a bear. Okay, so I can definitely feel my back here. And this is one of the purposes of warm-ups, is kind of checking in. So, if you have a bad back like I do right now, then, how is it feeling? Does it feel like, again, I can work the injury to try and stimulate healing? Or does it feel like working the injury is just creating inflammation and prolonging, again, that acute phase of the injury? Okay, from there, we can come into a down dog for a moment. Just get some blood flow into our legs, feet, and ankles. And then we'll come forward onto the belly into a sphinx. All right, propping yourself up on the elbows there. So you can also do the seal. I think seal might be a little overkill for me at the moment, so I'm just going to stay here. And again, injuries can change your edge. And again, this concept of an edge is super, super important in yoga. Your edge is where you're going to get the most benefit. You could say the most benefit with the least amount of risk. So we can see these two things on a continuum. So the more risk I'm willing to take, potentially the more benefit I'm going to get. On the other hand, the more safe I try to be, the less benefit I'm going to get. And, I think most people understand that concept, right? If I take all of my savings and I dump it into, say, Apple Computer right now, that's a lot of risk. But let's say Apple makes an announcement next year, like they have done in the past, something that really kind of can change the way we do things. They have some kind of revolutionary new technology or product, and the stock jumps up 100 times. Well, then I can retire. So I took a lot of risk, but I got a lot of benefit. However, the opposite could happen, right? I could put all my money into Apple Computer, and then they make an announcement that they're having quarterly losses, quarter after quarter. Market share for the iPhone is going down. One of their plants that makes chips in China is backed up, so they're having supply problems, and the stock plummets. Well, that could wipe me out completely, right? If all my money was in Apple. So similar concept happens with yoga postures, right? I'm working with my back right now. And right here, I'm feeling my back. I feel a little something. It's not at all painful. But some of you have seen me practice in the past where I'm doing that straight arm and I'm way back deeper into it. Again, when I'm feeling healthy, that feels safe for me. Yes, there is still some risk involved. You can hurt yourself or damage your body by pushing that hard. But the other side of it is that if you do nothing, a lot of times that's also risky. We again go back to this analogy with the money. In a sense, if you're not investing your money, then inflation will make your money less and less valuable. So, if you had $1,000 in 1980, it's not the same as $1,000 today. $1,000 in 1980 bought a lot more. It was worth a lot more than it is today. And that generally just is a continuing trend. So our bodies are kind of the same way. If I do nothing today to exercise my body, exercise my back, work my tissues, then generally speaking, tomorrow they're going to be worse off. Now, again, there are exceptions. So again, the acute phase of an injury, like where I am, I may just need rest. If you just ran a marathon, you may just need rest for a few days or maybe even a few weeks. If you just injured yourself, if you just had a surgery, there are all kinds of instances. So rest is an important process or phase. And the same can be true for your money as well, right? Investors will sometimes pull their money out of the markets. I'm talking about like, Warren Buffett type investors. They will sometimes put their money in cash because the best strategy at that time, the safest strategy when you're not sure what's going on, is to just have your money in cash, not have it in real estate, not have it in Bitcoin, not have it in Apple, to have it in cash. So, there are times in markets where these big investors will be like, I'm like, 70% cash, which is a lot because generally they want their money working. So similar thing with us. Sometimes we want to be resting or not doing anything. That's the best strategy to actually being healthy and whole again. Okay, let's come on out of that. I can definitely feel it in my back. And again, I'll say it's an open question right now for me. This is like an experiment. Is this a good idea right now, or is it too soon? I really don't know the answer. Again, having done this a while, I'll risk it. I don't think it's life or death. If I'm wrong, it just means that tomorrow I'm going to be in more pain than I otherwise would have been. And then I'll know that I should rest more, and I'll try and do that. Okay, let's come on out of that. And here's where you'd want your block. You can just roll onto your back, grab your block, and then very simply bend your knees, lift your hips, and you pretty much as high as you can, and you just place the block there, like that. And then straightening the legs and straightening the arms, we're stretching the front side of the body and also gently compressing our back. Now, what if you don't have a block? Well, you can repeat the last posture, Sphinx or Seal. You can go a little deeper if you'd like. You can also do a saddle pose, which is another nice back bend, yin back bend. Any of those, Sphinx, Seal, saddle pose, or this one, which is the supported bridge. And, if you don't have a block, you could use like a stack of books, or one girl sent me a picture of her doing this at home, and she had reams of paper, that she had stacked up. So, whatever works for you. So I'm definitely feeling my back here. And this might be a little too much. I don't know. It's high. The block is at its highest setting. And, I can mitigate the intensity by bending my knees a little bit. And so I'm trying to find an edge. I'm trying to find a position where I'm feeling a little bit of sensitivity. Why am I doing this? Well, again, the theory of healing from a yogic or Taoist perspective, a very simplistic idea of it is when the tissues are stimulated, they respond by actually getting stronger and healthier. When we leave them alone, sometimes the tissues just don't heal. And this is why the strategy of avoiding pain, avoiding discomfort, right? I hurt my back, it hurts, so I'm not going to do anything that hurts. Again, during the acute phase, yes. And I may still be in the acute phase. So if on Monday I'm like, oh my God, my back is killing me, I can't do anything, then that meant that this was a bad idea. And again, there just is some trial and error involved. It's just the way that it is. if I had a team of experts, that I can consult, then, maybe somebody might say, yeah, you're probably still in the acute phase. Then maybe I would have skipped today's class, but I don't have that. And I think many people don't. Doctors' visits, when I talk to people about, going to see their doctor, they talk about their deductible and how high it is and how expensive it is and how little insurance pays. And, I think it's a problem. I think that hopefully at some point in our culture, we'll just see the value of healthcare, and that we want everyone to have access to healthcare, and we want it to be easy to access. And in many parts of the world, that's kind of how it is. It just basically is a given that if you're born into, for us it would be the United States, that's something you're going to have access to, and it's going to be relatively easy for you to access. And unfortunately, many of us, myself included, will weigh, well, can I afford to go to do something to take care of my health or not? And that's really an unfortunate thing, because it would be nice if we had the tools and the means to simply just be like, okay, I need to do something about this. I'm going to do it. So if I had access to, experts, a doctor, scanners, tests, somebody with maybe more experience with acute injuries, that would be a great, person to talk to. Like maybe someone who deals a lot with sports injuries. She might say, yeah, usually injuries, you need 2 weeks. And so then I'm like, okay, I'm just going to take 2 weeks. I know I'm not going to do anything strenuous. But again, that's just a luxury I don't have. So, given past injuries and things like that, again, I don't think I'm doing any kind of permanent damage. I just might be prolonging that acute phase. So, anyway, this is, again, kind of an experiment, seeing where we are. And I do want to say that it could be immediately after class, I'm actually worse for a little while. This has happened before. But then once I bounce back further. I bounce back better than before. That's a trend that I'll be looking out for, and hopefully that's what will be happening. Okay, let's take our time. I'm going to have to be super careful here, because definitely feeling a lot of sensation. So I take my time. So again, I'm really trying to share this to encourage you to not be afraid to explore this in the future if you end up with an injury or something like that, because many people, I think, would think, if they felt like I do now, that absolutely means that they shouldn't be doing it, that they just need to avoid these things. And again, that's true in the short term. It can be true, but long term, very often, this is the only way we're going to completely heal. Okay, let's bring those legs in. We'll give them a little squeeze, shake it out. So I'm definitely feeling that in my back. Is it good or bad? I don't know yet. Okay, so again, it's kind of an open question. Was that too much, too soon? Could be. Or is this, again, going to stimulate my body to heal? All right, let's finish with a twist. So right over left, down to the left. Twisting is hard for me these days right now with the injury. So I'm going to really take my time getting into it. So the way these ancient traditions express that is they had a name for something they called life force, which is prana or chi. Many cultures have a name for this, by the way. So this isn't just an Asian thing. There are African cultures. The Greeks and the Romans had words for it. So it's not unique. I don't want to make it sound like this is something novel. or unique to India and China, and that, you know, they were somehow smarter or wiser than anyone else. I think what happened is in the West, once we found the scientific method, we kind of began to run everything through the scientific method, and anything that we didn't or couldn't run through it, we kind of just wrote off. And I think that that was a mistake. So there are many concepts or ideas that we had in our culture in ancient times that have been lost, that we've sort of expunged. We said, oh, that's superstition. You know, science doesn't support that. But a lot of times when someone says science doesn't support that, what they're really saying is we just haven't tested that, or we can't test that. So is there a life force in the body? Yes or no? I mean, it's kind of hard to say that there isn't, right? Because we all know a corpse isn't a human. If all a human being is a piece of meat, you know, a bunch of carbon-12 arranged in a certain way, well, then a corpse should be a human. But you can give a corpse love, medicine, surgery, yoga, and it's not going to respond to any of those things. Whereas if you give a live human being those things, they respond, they change, they grow. So what's the difference? Well, that difference is what the yogis and the Taoists call chi or prana, life force. Something's going on in my body that's not going on in a body that is deceased, of someone who's deceased. Okay? So again, in a sense, it's obvious. I think it is anyway. A live person, a dead person, not the same. What's the difference? Life force. So these traditions basically would say, if you can stimulate the body in a way that it sends life force to a damaged or injured area, that area is going to heal eventually. How do you do that? Well, there are various ways. Acupuncture, moxibustion, yoga postures, therapeutic massage, chiropractic care, prayer, meditation, you know, focusing the mind, visualization. These are all techniques that have been used by human beings to heal. I think as long as human beings have been on the planet. Again, we find these things in almost all ancient cultures. It's only in modern times that we've, again, taken many of these things and said that they're superstition. But what's interesting is even studies that have been done on prayer show that prayer works. Not prayer for one tradition, right? Not only Christian prayer, or only Jewish prayer, or only Hindu prayer. Prayer, full stop. You get a group together to pray for someone who's sick versus a control group. Very often the group that is prayed for, they do better. Statistically speaking, you can measure it. So again, that's a level of scientific proof that prayer works. Let's switch sides. So that was a study that was done a while ago, and I'm not sure if they've done follow-up studies or, you know, it's an interesting thing to explore. And, you know, you can have a group of people who don't believe in God pray and see if it still works. I think they may have even done a study like that. I don't know, but it's a very interesting question, you know, and it opens up things. Why does it work? What is happening there? Another fascinating thing is what's called the placebo effect. So generally speaking, because of the way that science views the world as basically like a machine, what scientists have been trying to do, and doctors and people who create drugs and medicine have been trying to do always, is eliminate what they call the placebo effect. And I think everybody knows what a placebo is, but just in case, if you give, you have three groups of people, you're testing for something. One group, you give something that you think is going to cure their illness, or maybe you know cures their illness. Another group, you give them essentially a sugar pill. You give them something that really doesn't do anything. And then the third group, you do nothing. And then you test the three groups. So the group you did nothing, you're not going to see any improvement, right? If you're, say, trying to cure their cancer, they're just going to follow the direction that most cancer patients follow. They're just going to get worse. Second group, the sugar pill group, the placebo group, some of them will actually improve. You didn't really give them anything. They just think they're getting something. And then the final group, you gave them something, and if they improve more than the placebo group, then generally that's when science and medicine says, oh yes, this is working. But it has to beat the placebo group. But one thing that myself and many other people have argued for is, why don't you just try and figure out how to improve that placebo effect? Why don't you figure out how to get people's minds to, I mean, if just giving someone a sugar pill is enough to help them improve, and they've actually done some testing on this. So interestingly, they found that placebo, if you're giving someone a pill, the larger the pill is, the more the placebo effect. So if you give someone a tiny little pill, and you're like, here, take this is going to cure your cancer, you're going to see less effect than if you give them this giant horse pill. You're like, all right, I got this crazy pill for you. It's not going to, be easy getting it down, but if you do, this is really going to work. A lot of times that's going to have more of an effect. Placebo surgeries work very well. So what that means is they cut you open, they don't do anything, and they just sew you back up, but you think you had a surgery. Placebo acupuncture also works well. So again, it's an interesting, I think, field of study, that what if instead of figuring out how to get rid of the placebo, we actually find out how to enhance the effect. Things like what I've talked about. But there may be more that we can do. And certain teachers that I've come across, and I don't necessarily prescribe to this, but it's just an interesting thought. Some teachers have said that all healing ultimately is placebo. And again, I'll share with you that my ex-girlfriend, who's a surgeon, she doesn't disagree with that. Again, she's maybe not convinced that it's necessarily true, but she wasn't like, oh no. We've had discussions about it, like, that ultimately it may just all be placebo. It may all just be the mind. So if someone needs to have their body cut open and organs taken out to convince their mind that they can heal, then that's what you need to do. But what if you could just, say something to somebody, or again, give somebody a giant sugar pill? That would be much less damage, right? It'd be much less invasive. So it's interesting, yoga postures. Can yoga postures heal us? Can a pill heal us? Do we need surgery? What do we need to heal? Maybe nothing. Maybe just the mind. And again, I'm not saying this is the case. So it's just interesting to explore that idea. Okay, let's unwind. Come back to neutral. I will share this, that my ex basically said surgery should be your last option for whatever it is. That was her advice. And she said she hopes she never has to have surgery as long as she lives. So keep that in mind. This is someone who does surgery for a living, and she has a unique perspective on what it works for, but also how much damage it can do. So it does work for certain things, for sure. Not all things equally. It's very bad for certain things, but people still will get surgeries. And it definitely has its side effects. So you want to take it seriously. Okay, let's counter stretch, and then you can set your timer for 6 minutes and take a rest for the next 6 minutes.